The Psychology of Great Leadership. Full audiobook. The Leader. Nobody taught you to be. Most people in positions of leadership are winging it. Not because they're incompetent, not because they don't care, but because nobody ever taught them the one thing that separates a great leader from an average one. That thing is not charisma, it's not authority, it's not even experience. It's understanding the human mind. In 1914, a woman named Lillian Moller Gilbreth wrote a book that was decades ahead of its time. She was one of the first people, and one of the first women, to argue that management was not a talent you were born with. It was a science, a discipline, a set of principles rooted in psychology that anyone could learn. The book was called The Psychology of Management, and in it she laid out the exact principles that make people perform at their best, stay motivated, and grow under leadership. Over a century later, every principle still holds. Because human beings haven't changed. This audiobook will walk you through Gilbreth's timeless framework, updated for the world we lead in today. Whether you manage a team of 2 or a company of 2,000, this is the foundation every leader needs. 8 chapters, 8 principles, each one grounded in Gilbreth's original work and applied to the way leadership works right now. Let's begin. Chapter 1. What managing minds really means. Lillian Gilbreth opened her book with a definition most managers have never heard, and desperately need. She wrote, "The psychology of management means the effect of the mind that is directing work upon that work which is directed, and the effect of this directed work upon the mind of the worker." Read that slowly. It's not just about getting work done. It's about 2 directions of influence. The leader's mind affects the work, and the work affects the worker's mind. Both directions matter, equally. This was radical in 1914, and it's still radical in most organizations today. Most management theory flows in one direction. Leader decides, team executes, results measured, repeat. The worker is treated as a variable in a productivity equation, not as a human being whose mind is the most valuable asset in the room. Here's the question Gilbreth was really asking. What kind of leader does your mind create? Because your mindset, your beliefs about people, your assumptions about motivation, your emotional state in a room, all of it radiates outward. Workers feel it. They respond to it, often unconsciously. A leader who believes people are lazy creates disengaged workers. Not because the people are actually lazy, but because low expectations communicate themselves in 1,000 invisible ways. In the instructions given, in the tone of feedback, in the level of trust extended. A leader who believes people are capable, curious, and motivated when given the right conditions, that leader creates something entirely different. Gilbreth identified 3 types of management that existed in her time. Traditional management, built on the authority of the manager. You do it because I said so. Compliance through power. Transitory management. A middle ground. Some systems, some structure, but inconsistent and often unpredictable. Scientific management built on principles, on understanding, on the psychology of the individual worker, on creating conditions in which people can do their best work. She argued, with evidence, that only scientific management, the kind rooted in psychology, produced lasting results, not just for the business, for the worker. The most important insight she offered was this: efficiency is best secured by placing emphasis on the person, not just the process. Your people are not cogs, they are minds. And the leader who understands this truth, truly understands it, operates from a completely different foundation than everyone else. Chapter 2. Individuality. The leader who sees every person. Every person on your team is different, not in a vague feel-good way, in a scientifically significant way. Different cognitive styles, different motivational triggers, different thresholds for stress, different ways of receiving feedback, different peak performance conditions. Gilbreth devoted an entire chapter to what she called individuality, and she argued it was the single most important variable in effective management. Under traditional management, individuality was suppressed. Workers were expected to conform to one standard, follow one set of instructions, produce at one level. The assumption was uniformity, that all workers were more or less interchangeable. Gilbreth destroyed this assumption completely. She wrote about the critical importance of separating output, tracking each person's performance individually, not as a group average. Because when you track teams collectively, the high performers get hidden and the low performers get covered. Nobody improves. Nobody is seen. She wrote about individual instruction cards, personalized guidance for each worker, tailored to their specific role and learning style. Not one-size-fits-all directives, but customized communication designed for that specific person. Think about the last time a manager or mentor saw you specifically, not as part of a team, not as a job title, but as an individual, with your particular strengths, your particular challenges, your particular potential. How did that feel? What did it make you capable of? Now think about the last time you felt invisible, one of a group, treated like a number. What did that do to your motivation? Gilbreth was making a profound point. People perform at their best when they feel individually seen. This is not a soft, optional leadership style. It is the most effective management strategy ever identified, and modern neuroscience has confirmed what she understood over 100 years ago. Here's how the principle of individuality applies to leadership today. First, know your people individually, not just their job functions, their strengths, their growth areas, what energizes them, what frustrates them, what they're quietly ambitious about. Second, give individual feedback, not group feedback. When you address a problem in a team meeting without naming it specifically, it usually lands on nobody. When you have a direct, private, respectful conversation with one person, it lands and it changes behavior. Third, create individual growth paths. Don't apply one development plan to everyone. One person needs more autonomy. Another needs more structure. One thrives with public recognition. Another prefers a quiet acknowledgement. Learn the difference and respond accordingly. The leader who sees people as individuals doesn't just build a better team. They build loyalty that can't be bought and performance that can't be mandated. Chapter 3. Functionalization. The right person in the right role. One of Gilbreth's most powerful concepts, and one that is consistently underused in leadership today, is what she called functionalization. At its core, functionalization means one thing: separate the planning from the performing, and within both planning and performing, specialize deliberately. In traditional management, the person with the most authority did everything. They planned, directed, disciplined, trained, and problem-solved all at once. This created bottlenecks. It created inefficiency. It created leaders so stretched across functions that they excelled at none. Gilbreth proposed something different. Assign each function, each distinct type of mental or physical work, to the person best suited to perform it. Not just by skill level, but by psychological fit. She described a range of specialized functions that in today's language we'd recognize as the planner, the trainer, the quality controller, the communicator, the coach, the technician, each requiring different cognitive strengths, each requiring different personality traits. Here's where this principle gets profound, and where most organizations fail completely. When you put the wrong person in a functional role, even if they're technically skilled, you create invisible friction. The detail-oriented person forced into a big-picture visionary role. The creative thinker trapped in a compliance-focused position. The natural communicator buried in solitary technical work. Each of these people is working against their psychological grain, every day. They're expending enormous energy not just on the work, but on fighting their own instincts to do it. Gilbreth understood that misaligned function is the greatest source of waste in any organization. Not wasted time, not wasted money, wasted human potential. Here's how to apply functionalization as a leader today. Step 1. Map the actual cognitive demands of every role on your team, not the job title, the real mental and psychological requirements. Does this role require sustained focus or rapid switching? Does it require risk tolerance or caution? Does it require empathy or analytical distance? Step 2. Map the cognitive and psychological profiles of each team member. Where do they naturally thrive? Where do they visibly drain? Step 3. Align wherever possible. This doesn't always mean restructuring roles completely. Sometimes it means rebalancing responsibilities, shifting certain functions to better suited people, giving someone ownership of the specific part of their job where they come alive. When people operate in functional alignment, they don't just perform better, they enjoy the work. And people who enjoy their work are the most powerful competitive advantage any organization has. Chapter 4. Measurement. What gets measured gets transformed. You can't manage what you don't measure. This phrase is often attributed to modern business thinkers, but Lillian Gilbreth was making this exact argument in 1914, with far greater depth than the phrase suggests. Because Gilbreth wasn't just talking about measuring output, she was talking about measuring with the explicit purpose of understanding the human being behind the output. She introduced two concepts that became foundational to modern management: motion study, the analysis of exactly how work is being done. Every movement, every step, every decision in a workflow, not to criticize, but to find the hidden inefficiencies that the worker themselves often can't see because they're inside the process. Time study, the measurement of how long tasks genuinely take, not how long managers assume they take. Because assumptions, Gilbreth found, were almost always wrong. And wrong assumptions create tasks that are either impossibly demanding or insultingly easy, neither of which produces optimal performance. Here's the psychological insight Gilbreth embedded in her measurement chapter that most people miss. Measurement done right is not surveillance. It's a gift. When you study how someone works, not to judge them, but to understand them, you find the places where they're wasting energy on unnecessary steps. You find the tools that aren't working for them. You find the environment that's causing friction, and you remove those obstacles. The worker suddenly performs better, not because they tried harder, but because the system around them improved. And when performance improves through system change rather than personal effort, something powerful happens. The worker feels supported rather than pressured. That's the psychological genius of Gilbreth's measurement philosophy. Here's how to apply it in your leadership. First, measure with curiosity, not suspicion. When you track performance, frame it as discovery. I want to understand how this work actually happens so we can make it better, not as monitoring. Second, let people see their own data. Gilbreth emphasized posting records where workers could see them, not as a public shaming mechanism, but as a source of feedback and pride. When people see their own progress, they are motivated to continue. When they see their own decline, they are motivated to understand why. Third, measure inputs, not just outputs. Don't just measure what was produced. Measure the conditions under which it was produced, the hours worked, the tools available, the clarity of instructions, because the same person under different conditions is a completely different performer. What you measure shapes what your team values. Measure wisely, and you shape a culture. Chapter 5. Teaching. Every leader is a teacher. Lillian Gilbreth was extraordinarily direct about this. Every leader is a teacher. Always. Whether they know it or not. Every time you give an instruction, you are teaching. Every time you model a behavior, you are teaching. Every time you react to a mistake, you are teaching. Every time you prioritize, you are teaching. The only question is, what are you teaching? Gilbreth's chapter on teaching is one of the most psychologically sophisticated sections of her book. She argued that effective management teaching must conform to what she called psychological laws, principles about how the human mind actually learns and retains information. She identified several of these laws that translate directly into modern leadership. Form the right habit first. Gilbreth was emphatic. It is far harder to unlearn a wrong habit than to learn the right one from the start. This means that when you bring someone new into a role, the first few weeks are the most critical of their entire tenure. What they learn first, they will default to under pressure forever. Most leaders know this intuitively. Few act on it consistently. They rush onboarding. They assume the person will figure it out. They drop new hires into the environment and wait to see what happens. Gilbreth would have none of it. Train attention before expecting performance. Gilbreth wrote extensively about stimulating attention, because attention is the prerequisite for all learning. A person who is distracted, anxious, overwhelmed, or disengaged cannot learn. They can only survive. What creates attention? Relevance, meaning, clear purpose. The worker who understands why a task matters absorbs the how far more efficiently than one who is simply told what to do. Before you teach a method, teach the reason. Educate the imagination. This was one of Gilbreth's most forward-thinking ideas. She argued that great workers and great managers need to be able to visualize a finished result before beginning, to hold a mental image of excellence as a target. The leader's job is to paint that picture clearly enough that the team can see it too. Here's how to lead as a teacher. 1. Be deliberate about what you model. Your team watches everything you do. Your punctuality teaches punctuality. Your integrity teaches integrity. Your panic teaches panic. Your calm teaches calm. You are always on display. 2. Teach the why before the how. Motivation to learn follows understanding of purpose. Always. 3. Create space for people to practice. Learning requires doing, not just listening. If your instruction model is, I explain, you do perfectly on the first try, you've created a culture of fear around mistakes. Instead, I show, we do together, you try with support, then you own it. 4. Give feedback as close to the moment as possible. Gilbreth wrote about the importance of immediate correction, not criticism, course adjustment. The longer the gap between a behavior and its feedback, the weaker the learning. The greatest leaders in history were always teachers first, not because they were patient or kind, though that helped, because they understood that a team that keeps learning is the only team that keeps winning. Chapter 6. Incentives and Welfare. What actually motivates people. Gilbreth dedicated 2 full chapters to motivation, one on incentives and one on welfare. I'm combining them here because in her framework, they represent 2 sides of the same coin. Incentives are what you offer to reward performance. Welfare is the environment you create that makes performance possible in the first place. Most leaders get incentives partially right and welfare almost entirely wrong. On incentives, Gilbreth made a distinction that is still misunderstood today. Direct incentives versus indirect incentives. Direct incentives are obvious. Pay, bonuses, promotions, the quantifiable rewards for output. Indirect incentives are subtler and often more powerful. Recognition, autonomy, growth opportunities, the sense of being trusted, the knowledge that your work matters, the feeling of belonging to something meaningful. Gilbreth argued that direct incentives create compliance. Indirect incentives create commitment. And in the long run, only commitment drives sustainable excellence. Here's what the research, modern research, a century after Gilbreth, confirms. Once people are paid fairly, additional money produces diminishing returns on motivation. What drives the highest performers is autonomy, control over how they do their work, mastery, the opportunity to keep getting better, and purpose, the belief that what they do genuinely matters. Gilbreth called these things indirect incentives. Modern psychology calls it intrinsic motivation. The name has changed. The truth hasn't. Now, welfare. Gilbreth's concept of welfare was remarkably holistic for 1914. She argued that a leader's responsibility to a worker extended beyond the job itself, to their physical, mental, and moral development. Physical welfare. Do your people have the right tools, the right environment, appropriate rest from fatigue? A tired, physically uncomfortable worker is not a productive worker, no matter how motivated they are. Mental welfare. Are your people growing, learning, being given challenges that develop them? Or are they stagnating, doing the same tasks in the same way, year after year, slowly disengaging? Moral welfare. Do your people feel that the organization treats them with dignity, that the standards applied to them are fair, that they are not asked to compromise their integrity to meet a target? A leader who genuinely attends to the welfare of their people does not just retain them. They earn something that cannot be manufactured: genuine loyalty, the kind that shows up in a crisis, the kind that gives discretionary effort, the kind that becomes the culture of a team. Gilbreth summarized it simply: the goal of management is not just efficient work. It is the development of the worker. Work done well should make the person doing it better, not just the company richer. That is the standard. Hold yourself to it. Chapter 7. The Complete Leader. Lillian Gilbreth believed, and she proved, that great leadership is not a personality type. It is not a gift. It is not reserved for the charismatic, the forceful, or the naturally commanding. It is a science, a set of principles that can be studied, practiced, and mastered. And at the center of that science is a single idea she returned to again and again throughout her book. The emphasis in successful management lies on the person, not the process. Every principle she outlined: individuality, functionalization, measurement, teaching, incentives, welfare, every single one of them orbits this center. They are all different expressions of the same commitment: to see, understand, and develop the human being doing the work. This is what separates the leader people follow because they must, from the leader people follow because they want to, because they believe in them, because they feel seen by them, because they grow under them. Here's the honest truth about leadership that Gilbreth understood, and that most leadership training still fails to teach: managing people is the hardest intellectual challenge there is. It requires you to understand psychology, your own and others. It requires you to hold complexity, to see patterns in group behavior while never losing sight of individual needs. It requires you to balance short-term output with long-term development, to maintain standards without crushing motivation, to push people toward excellence while creating an environment where they feel safe enough to try and fail. It is not a role that gets mastered. It is a practice that gets deepened. The leaders who have the greatest impact are not the ones who arrived knowing everything. They're the ones who stayed curious, who kept learning the people around them, who treated leadership as a discipline worthy of their full attention every day. That's who Gilbreth was writing for, and that's who this audiobook was made for. Closing. The Leader You're Becoming. Lillian Moller Gilbreth was a woman who managed a household of 14 children while simultaneously becoming one of the most respected management scientists of the 20th century. She didn't just theorize about managing people. She lived it, at a scale that most leaders never encounter. And what she found, what she proved, chapter by chapter, in the book you just listened to, is that the secret to extraordinary leadership is not complexity. It's not authority. It's not brilliance. It's attention, consistent, disciplined, human attention. Attention to individuality, attention to function, attention to measurement, attention to teaching, attention to motivation, attention to the whole person, not just the employee. Here is your one next step. Choose one principle from this audiobook, just one, and apply it deliberately in the next week. Notice one person on your team as an individual you haven't fully seen. Or study one workflow with genuine curiosity about what's creating friction. Or ask one person what would make their work more meaningful. One observation, one question, one act of real leadership attention. You cannot become the complete leader Gilbreth described overnight, but you become them, Exactly as she said about all great development, one deliberate step at a time. The best leaders in history weren't born, they were built by exactly this kind of intentional, psychology-driven practice. You're already on the path. Keep walking. If this audiobook gave you something real, subscribe to this channel. New audiobooks on leadership, mindset, and the psychology of success every week. Hit the bell so you never miss one. And remember, the most powerful investment you will ever make is in understanding the minds of the people you lead.